Hello, I am back with more Costco bulk food storage tips. So many of you loved the last one. It only feels right that I come back here and share some more ways to use and store these huge hauls we lug back from Costco. Once again, these are going to be great even if you just have one person at home. There's going to be some new ingredients this time and also some popular ready-made foods, because let's be honest, it's very hard to resist the ready-made food section. And of course, we're gonna be diving into all the ways to really maximize the bang for your buck, especially in this economy. Let's get into it. Here's everything I got this time. So to begin with, I got this very large container of strawberries. Because, well, I really love strawberries. I enjoy eating them fresh, whether it's on its own or, cut up in my salad, over my yogurt. But strawberries honestly don't last very long in the fridge. So usually the first thing I do with these is to weed out any bruised berries and just leave the perfect ones in the clamshell containers to store. This batch, sadly, is a little bit on the beaten up side. I think I must have accidentally squished it when I was just heaving all the groceries back home. After picking out the few that are fine, which I'll save for this week's breakfast, I still have a lot left. But that's okay. For the rest of these, I'll be using them right away. So I just like to give them a good rinse, a nice little salt water bath, and then drying them as thoroughly as possible with some paper towels. And also, to prepare them for storage, I like to just trim off the tops, the leafy parts. You can also definitely use a strawberry huller if you have one. And then here are my two ways of making sure none of these go to waste. For half of these, the plan is to freeze them alongside some other fruits like bananas and blueberries. Again, that's why patting them dry is crucial, because any moisture means that they likely won't be able to freeze as well. And here's the important part. I lay them out on a parchment-lined baking tray, making sure they're not touching each other. And this step is necessary because freezing them this way individually is what keeps them from clumping up together into one giant berry lump that's impossible to separate. Then once they're frozen solid, usually it takes about, I would say 2 to 3 hours, maybe more. Sometimes I do it overnight. I like to just portion them out and pre-measure them into individual smoothie portions. For this one, I'm doing a berry forward flavor. That's why there's the strawberries, the blueberries, and bananas, but you can totally switch it up as you like. And then I just put them each into different containers. This way, I can just grab a single container in the morning, throw that straight into the blender, add whatever yogurt or milk I prefer that day, however much depending on the consistency I want, blend it up, and then I'll have this perfect breakfast or snack ready without having to measure anything. Honestly, this has been a really great time saver, especially on busy mornings. Now going back to the remaining half of the berries, I like to make macerated strawberries, which is really just a fancy term for fresh strawberries that have been softened and sweetened with a little bit of sugar. All you need to do is to slice them up and sprinkle them with some sugar. In this case though, I'm adding in some of the honey lemon we made in the last video. This is why I said it was perfect for so many things. And a squeeze of this fig balsamic vinegar, just for some fun. Give that a good mix and just let that sit for about 30 minutes to an hour. During this time, the sugar and the honey really helps draw out the juice in the berries and really helps sort of intensify that strawberry flavor. It's very good even just on its own, but it also becomes this sweet and tart syrupy topping that's perfect for everything, really. The good news too is that it does freeze well, so that's why I'm storing it and saving it for a rainy day. Let's talk about the Costco rotisserie chicken. I feel like this one's the ultimate Costco staple that everyone gets. It's a great deal, it's juicy, it's flavorful, and it's quite sizable, really. I do very much like taking it home and having it for lunch or dinner straight, but I will say there is so much more potential here where I like to really maximize its value and stretch it out across 3 to 4 different meals. As a drumstick and wings lover, those are usually the parts I devour first, the parts that I eat just straight, as is. But as you can see, there's still quite a lot of meat left on the chicken, so I usually go ahead and try to pull most of that meat off the bone in these large chunks. So then I'm left with a pile of ready to eat chicken and the leftover chicken carcass. Focusing first on the meat, with this I like to shred it down right away into smaller pieces where they're looking kind of stringy almost. I'm not gonna lie, it is kind of tedious, but I will also tell you that the work does pay off. So I usually just throw some music on in the background and zone out while I do this. So once I have all the meat shredded, I'll store some for immediate use within the week in a container, and then the rest I'll put in these reusable bags, just kind of flattening them out as best as I can where they can then be stored in the freezer. And this shredded chicken right here is perfect for so many different meals, especially when you're looking to just add some protein into whatever meal you're making. Like how I made some pesto pasta the other day, where I just blanched my frozen chicken in the pasta water. Then I just mixed it all up together in the pesto sauce, and this was delicious. Or actually just yesterday when I made some quick noodles for lunch, and I thought I'd add some chicken along with some cucumbers on top. The good thing too is that the flavor of the chicken is subtle enough that it honestly goes with most cuisines. So, really super handy. Now to go back a little bit, remember that carcass with most of the meat picked off. This is another gem because it's essentially a shortcut to making some really delicious chicken broth. I like to just give it a light fry first. It just helps bring out the flavors even more. It's the same reason why I'm adding some water to get those brown flavor bits at the bottom of the pot. Then I'm adding in my vegetables, my aromatics, so there's celery, carrots, onions, some water. And then I just let this simmer away very slowly on a low heat because I want to have a clear broth. And you want to do this for several hours, at least 4 to 5 really, if you want sort of a richer chicken broth. So if you have a slow cooker, this is a great time to pull that out. So then what you end up with is this beautiful golden broth that's going to be way more flavorful than anything store-bought. I'm just straining it here, so all that's left is the broth itself. And once again, this broth can become the foundation for so many meals. It's great as is too, of course. I actually had some of this before my colonoscopy, maybe TMI, but I do also love making a simple soup with it. Just adding in some fresh vegetables, also some of that leftover rotisserie chicken meat from earlier, and then dressing it up by the end with some chopped fresh parsley, and you have yourself a very comforting meal for when it's terribly cold outside. So this next one is a bit of a chance purchase for me. An impulse buy. The story is I was literally standing in the checkout line when one of the employees walked over with this huge rack of fresh pizzas. And I couldn't resist. So here it is, the very popular Costco pizza in its entirety, the whole pie. The thing is though, right, these pizzas are great, but they are massive. But it's really not so bad if I can store it and have it over the course of the next couple weeks. So the first thing I'm doing is to separate each slice out. They're not too thick, which means they're relatively stackable. And I have about a total of 12 slices here. Now the next thing to do is to individually wrap each slice in foil. The foil wrapping is key here because this is what helps prevent freezer burn, while also keeping the crust from getting soggy. Sometimes I'll also store 2 slices together for those hungrier days. It is quite a bit of foil, but I do usually end up using the same piece of foil for toasting the slice later, so it's really serving multiple purposes here. To really make sure there's no chance of a freezer burn, I'm also storing the foil wrapped pizzas into these tightly sealed Ziploc bags with a purchase date on top as a reminder of how long it's been there. So then this way, on a busy day, or if I'm just feeling, peckish, I can just pop one in the toaster oven straight from the freezer using that same foil as the base on the tray. And then, while it's piping hot, fresh from the oven, I like to drizzle it with some hot honey on top, a crack of black pepper, and that is a 10 out of 10 for me. Pesto is one of my favorite sauces to enjoy. I love making fresh pesto at home, but I also love having a shortcut handy when I don't have the time to do it from scratch. So this jar of pesto is another staple purchase for me. The only problem, again, is that pesto isn't something that keeps well once it's opened. It'll oxidize, lose some of its vibrant color, lose some of its flavor. So my way of countering that is to, once again, freeze it while it's good. Now you can definitely use ice cube trays for this too, but as someone who doesn't really own any, I like to portion it in these flexible silicone molds. And these actually end up working better for me given the amount I usually want per portion. And I feel like for this step, it really doesn't have to be super precise or anything. I'm just roughly scooping about the same size into each mold, then I'll just pop it in the freezer and let them freeze overnight until they're completely solid. Once they're frozen, I just gently flex and peel the silicone mold, really just trying to pop out these dome-shaped pesto portions. I do also want to say that they are a bit oily and they melt pretty easily, so I do try to be quick when I'm transferring them to a Ziploc bag, again, for longer term freezer storage. And you already saw earlier how I made some pasta with this pesto. Adds that lovely herbaceous, garlicky flavor. What I did also end up making with them is actually some compound butter, which I'll go into in this next section. So, as you know, with how much cooking and baking and overall bread consuming in this household, butter is always a must-buy for me. It is probably the top item that I need a bulk purchase of. And because of that, I like keeping both salted and unsalted versions on hand because they each serve different purposes. For the unsalted butter, I primarily use it for baking, and with the quantities I'm making, there's usually no need to further divide each block. So with these ones, if I don't have any baking projects coming up, I just focus on storage. So I keep them in their original packaging and just wrap each block tightly in plastic wrap, and also placing them in a freezer bag for extra protection. This way they can maintain that fresh flavor even months later. I do usually also just leave one out in case I spontaneously decide to bake something one day. For the salted butter, I like to do a few things with this. I do keep one block out for everyday cooking needs, but to make things easier, I'm also portioning it out ahead of time. And this one's a tip that I learned a while ago, but essentially I'm dividing the block of butter up into tablespoon portions or less. I do cut up my parchment paper ahead of time, so then I can use these small strips of paper now as a divider. This way, the individual slices won't stick together, and it's going to be much easier to take each piece out when I need it. I think this size is perfect for spreading on bread or tossing into a hot pan when I need just a little bit for sauteing or making eggs. And once they're all cut up, I just store them in a tightly sealed container and just have that on standby in the fridge. Now going to my other favorite way of using and storing the salted butter. It is to make some compound butter. I actually started doing this last year because I love how handy it is and how easily it can just completely transform a meal. And they're really not that hard to make. So usually I first let the butter soften at room temperature, or if I want to move a little quickly, I will warm it up in the microwave for a few seconds until they're moldable. You see how it's just spreading like buttercream? Then I'll go in with the flavorings, and this time I'm going with some pesto, which we were just talking about earlier. This is a store-bought one, along with a little bit of this homemade version that I made with some leftover greens. And then in the other bowl, I'm adding in some chili crunch and a little bit of chili oil to make a spicy version. And because the butter's so soft, it's very easy to just mix everything together to incorporate all our little additions, and immediately you can see that color change. Speckled green for the pesto, a vibrant orange red for the chili version. It looks amazing. Then to store them, I just put it directly in some plastic wrap and try to finagle and roll it up into a log, just twisting both ends so I can then put it in the fridge or freezer, depending on when I want to use it, and just refrigerate it until it's firm. If you've watched my chili crunch video before, you've already seen some of the amazing things we can make with this chili compound butter. Whether it's just spread on toast or add it into some mac and cheese, or use to saute your favorite protein like these shrimps right here. Just doing the heavy work now so future me can benefit from a delicious meal that can be made in minutes. Next up, we have a massive package of ground beef. In general, I tend to like to stock up on some type of ground meat at Costco because it's very easy to use across a variety of dishes. I got ground beef this time though because I was craving for something meatier in flavor, but the storage method for this is the same across any type of ground meat you want to buy. So to start with, because there's so much, I like to portion them out by weight. Usually about half a pound or around 230 grams per portion, which is perfect for around 2 to 3 meals. You know, one for today, one for leftovers, and more. This way I can just pull out 1 or 2 portions when I need it without worrying about needing to defrost an entire pack. And here's the game changer. I use a rolling pin to help me flatten the meat out until it's super thin. So it almost looks like a meat pancake of sorts. And there's 2 reasons why this is an important step. One, because it really helps minimize the space used in your freezer since they become so much easier to stack on top of each other. And 2, it makes it much easier to defrost later. So much so that you can even just defrost it the day of without needing to thaw it overnight. Which is what actually happened to me earlier this week. I was craving something more hearty and stewy last minute, so I decided to make some nikujaga, a Japanese meat and potato stew. This recipe is by my friend Rie. I chopped up my vegetables, some onions, carrots, and purple potatoes, fried them up in some sesame oil, added some broth, and the ground beef can just go right in. It distributes real easily throughout the dish. Then I just let all of that cook some more with some added seasonings like sugar, soy sauce, mirin, and sake. And letting that reduce some more until everything's perfectly cooked through. Until I end up with this very flavorful, hearty stew that's even better enjoyed with a warm bowl of fluffy rice. All right, if I'm being honest, this banana nut loaf is another impulse buy. In my defense, it is a 2-pound loaf for $7.99, and I can never resist a good deal, especially if it's a sweet treat. I will say too that I did buy this with the intention of eating a few slices the day of, and then saving the rest as a backup plan, whether it's a late night sweet tooth emergency or when I'm needing a little pick-me-up on a rainy day. So that's why I'm slicing the entire loaf right away and preparing to freeze it immediately before it starts drying out. I do, after all, want to keep this moist. And similar to the pizza before, I'm wrapping each individual slice in some foil, since I'll likely also be reheating this in my toaster oven on most days. Same reasoning as always, freezer burn is our enemy, which is why we're gonna go ahead and pack them tightly into a freezer bag. This one's actually a reused frozen bread bag. That's why it looks a little banged up. Also, by the way, a lot of you mentioned this trick in the comments last time, where you can use a straw to suck out the air, kind of mimicking the effect of a vacuum sealer. So I tried, and I think I failed. I just ended up giving myself hiccups, but I see the potential. You just need to try again. Anyways, going back to the banana nut bread, I ended up making some French toast with it for brunch over the weekend. Just thought it was a fun way of transforming it into something extra special. So I just took a slice or two straight from the freezer. They defrost really quickly. Then I dipped them each into a mixture of beaten eggs, a splash of milk, some cream, some cinnamon, and just really let each side soak up that mixture. Then I'm melting some of that salted butter we stored earlier in a pan until it almost browns a little for that extra bit of nuttiness. And in goes the thick banana bread slices, both of which cook up beautifully. They get this gorgeous caramelized, slightly crispy exterior while staying soft and moist inside. And in preparation for serving, I'm actually reheating a portion of the macerated strawberries we made earlier. Remember these? Just breaking off what I need and giving it a few seconds in the microwave to get that syrupy texture back. So then when it comes to plating it up, I have my warm French toast banana bread stacked on top of each other. On goes a very generous dollop of homemade whipped cream that's melting as we speak, topped with those macerated strawberries, also a drizzle of maple syrup, and this truly tasted like a dream. Minimal effort, maximum reward. And there it is. There's just something so satisfying about pulling different components from the freezer of items that you prepped earlier and assembling them into a dish that looks and tastes like it comes from a restaurant. I hope you learned a couple more storage tips this time that helps you really maximize their value. As always, if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments which tip is your favorite, which one you want to try first, or if you have any Costco hacks of your own. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.